Are you ready to confront pure terror? Turn on the lights. They won't save you. We're opening the doors to a world where darkness doesn't just blind, it consumes the soul. Here, in the darkest corners of the night, even your breath can become a harbinger of nightmares. Question everything you knew about safety and comfort. Are you prepared to hear eerie whispers from nowhere, invade your mind, and torment every thought? Leave your fears at the door, because what we show you will make them burst forth.
Detective Ella pulled up to the entrance of the abandoned hospital, her heart racing with a blend of apprehension and determination. The once proud structure loomed before her, its cracked fade a stark reminder of its sinister past. The peeling paint and shattered windows gave the building an unsettling appearance, as if it were a giant, gaping wound in the landscape. Weeds crept through the cracks of the pavement, reclaiming what mankind had abandoned, while the air was thick with the scent of dampness and decay. As she stepped out of her vehicle, a chill swept through the air, sending a shiver down her spine. Ella took a deep breath, steeling herself against the eerie silence that surrounded her. The faint rustle of leaves echoed in her ears, accompanied by the distant cawing of crows that circled overhead like ominous sentinels. The hospital had a dark history, one that whispered through the shadows of its crumbling walls, a place notorious for its horrific experiments and failed procedures that had left many patients to suffer. The stories of agony and despair clung to the air like a thick fog, and as she approached the entrance, Ella couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. With each step, she noticed subtle signs of supernatural activity, flickering lights in the upper windows, an inexplicable cold draft that swirled around her, and the distant sound of anguished cries that seemed to echo from within the bowels of the hospital. Her instincts told her that something was terribly wrong, and a sense of foreboding settled in her gut. This was no ordinary investigation. It was a descent into the heart of darkness, where the past refused to rest. Ella pushed open the heavy, rusted doors of the hospital, the creaking sound resonating through the dusty foyer like a warning bell. As she stepped inside, a musty odor enveloped her, a pungent reminder of the lives once lived within these walls. The dim light filtering through broken windows cast eerie shadows across the cracked tiles, and the oppressive silence was punctuated only by the distant drip of water and the faint scuttling of unseen creatures. With her flashlight cutting through the darkness, she ventured deeper into the hospital. Each step felt deliberate, as if the very ground beneath her was reluctant to let her pass. Suddenly, a flicker of light caught her eye. Ella turned her head sharply, but the source vanished, leaving only the unsettling impression of something just out of sight. Her pulse quickened, and she felt an inexplicable chill, as if a cold hand had brushed against her neck. As she continued her exploration, she stumbled upon an old examination room. The site was grotesque, rusty surgical instruments lay scattered across a metal tray, and old, yellowed patient records were strewn about, their pages fragile and crumbling. She picked up a file, her hands trembling as she read the hastily scrawled notes of failed treatments and experiments gone horrifically wrong. The names of patients echoed in her mind, and she couldn't help but feel the weight of their suffering pressing down on her. Then, without warning, she heard a whisper, a soft, mournful sound that seemed to swirl around her, echoing off the walls. Ella froze, her breath caught in her throat. From the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow shift, a dark figure gliding silently across the room. Panic surged through her as she turned, only to find nothing but a lingering chill in the air. Driven by a sense of urgency, Ella decided to examine the hospital's archived records. The files were disorganized, but as she sifted through them, she uncovered harrowing accounts of patients who had endured unimaginable suffering. The words on the pages seemed to leap out at her, echoing the pain of those long gone. Ella could almost feel their torment, their rage mingling with her own as the truth became undeniable. The hospital was a place of horror, and those souls were not at rest. Every revelation deepened her resolve, but it also heightened the danger that surrounded her. The spirits, angered by the unearthing of their past, began to lash out more violently, leaving Ella with no choice but to confront the twisted legacy of the hospital. The walls felt like they were closing in on her, and the weight of the soul's anguish seeped into her very being. Ella's determination to uncover the truth now felt like a double-edged sword, as she realized that the souls of the damned were not merely haunting the building, they were seeking vengeance beyond the grave. The hospital was just the beginning, and the curse threatened to engulf the entire town, demanding justice for the horrors that had unfolded within its forsaken halls. Determined to put an end to the chaos unleashed by the vengeful spirits, Ella learned of offerings, tokens of respect that might pacify the anguished spirits. A small locket, a withered flower, or a handwritten note expressing remorse were among the items deemed significant. Yet, the thought of facing these powerful entities alone filled her with trepidation. The oppressive silence was shattered by the distant sound of anguished wails that echoed through the corridors, a chilling reminder of the wrath she was about to confront. She set down her offerings and began to speak, her voice steady yet trembling.
"I come in peace,"
she declared, hoping her sincerity would resonate with the spirits. Suddenly, the temperature plunged, and the shadows around her began to writhe, coalescing into figures that loomed with palpable fury. Ella's heart raced as the most powerful spirit emerged, a tormented visage of a patient whose eyes burned with rage. It advanced upon her, its wails intensifying into a deafening cacophony that reverberated through her very soul. She felt the weight of its sorrow, its anguish clawing at her mind, threatening to pull her into an abyss of despair. Pushing against the overwhelming fear that threatened to consume her, Ella recalled the rituals she had studied. With trembling hands, she held out the locket, a small gesture, but one that carried her deepest intentions.
"I honor your pain,"
she cried out, her voice rising above the chaos.
"You are not forgotten."
For a moment, the spirit hesitated, its rage flickering like a candle in the wind. Ella seized the opportunity to continue, her words spilling forth like a desperate prayer. As she poured her heart into the offering, the room filled with an ethereal light, illuminating the tortured faces of the spirits surrounding her. They seemed to pause, their expressions shifting from fury to confusion, as if her words had breached the wall of their torment. But just as hope began to bloom, the most powerful spirit lunged forward, unleashing a torrent of rage that knocked Ella to her knees. She gasped for air, feeling the weight of despair pressing down on her. In that moment, she realized the battle was far from over, as the spirits roared in unison, their cries echoing through the forsaken halls. Ella's physical and mental limits were being tested, and she had to summon every ounce of strength to confront the wrathful tide that threatened to consume her whole. Heart pounding, she clutched the locket tightly, feeling its cool surface against her skin, a talisman of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Every ounce of energy seemed to vanish with each anguished scream that reverberated in her mind.
"Why have you come?"
A voice boomed, echoing with a chilling resonance that seemed to shake the very foundations of the hospital. This was the embodiment of the curse, the spirit of a patient wronged by the very institution meant to heal.
"I come to honor your pain,"
she shouted, her voice trembling but resolute, the locket clutched tightly in her hand.
"to seek justice for what was done to you."
The spirit recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame. But as quickly as hope ignited, the darkness surged back, a tide of fury crashing against her. With a deep breath, Ella prepared for her final desperate gambit. She recalled the stories of sacrifice she had uncovered, tales of souls bound by revenge that could only be freed through an act of profound empathy. In that moment of clarity, she knew what she had to do.
I will bear your pain.
She cried, tears streaming down her face, her heart heavy with the weight of their suffering.
I will carry it so you do not have to.
The atmosphere shifted, the spirits hesitating as if her words struck a chord. But the powerful figure surged forward, a whirlwind of wrath that threatened to consume her. The room erupted in chaos, the walls shaking, and the very air charged with an almost tangible despair. Ella felt herself being pulled, her body weakening under the strain of the spirit's anguish. As she prepared for the inevitable, a surge of energy coursed through her. With a final, defiant scream, she released the locket into the air, a symbol of her sacrifice, her willingness to bear the burden of their pain. The locket shimmered, enveloped in a radiant light that pierced through the darkness, illuminating the hospital with an otherworldly glow. As the light expanded, engulfing the spirits, she felt a profound sense of peace wash over her, a quiet reassurance that the battle was not in vain. The climactic battle had left the abandoned hospital in a state of eerie stillness, as if the very walls were exhaling in relief. Detective Ella knelt on the cold floor, breathless and trembling, the remnants of her energy spent. The oppressive weight of the spirit's anguish had lifted, replaced with a delicate tranquility that hung in the air like a fragile promise. The curse that had plagued the hospital for decades was finally broken, the vengeful souls liberated from their torment, leaving behind only whispers of their suffering. Physically, Ella bore the scars of her ordeal. Her clothes were tattered and stained. More profoundly, her eyes reflected a haunting knowledge, a deeper understanding of pain and loss that would forever shape her perception of life. The experience had forced her to confront the darkest aspects of humanity and the fragility of existence. Sleep eluded her as nightmares of anguished faces continued to haunt her dreams, but amidst the terror, there was also a flicker of hope. The spirits were free, their cries of vengeance silenced, and for that, she felt a bittersweet solace. As dawn broke, casting a golden light over the hospital's crumbling facade, Ella stepped outside, the fresh air filling her lungs like a cleansing balm. The town around her seemed almost reborn, the ominous presence that had once loomed over it dissipating like fog under the sun. Residents ventured outside, cautiously optimistic, unaware of the horrors that had unfolded within the hospital's walls. Yet Ella knew that the shadows of the past would linger in the hearts of those who had suffered, and her own heart ached with empathy. In the weeks that followed, Ella dedicated herself to honoring the memories of those lost in the hospital. She organized a memorial service, inviting the town to remember the patients who had endured unimaginable suffering. As she spoke, her voice steady but filled with emotion, she urged the community to recognize the importance of compassion and healing. The faces of the townsfolk reflected a mix of sorrow and gratitude, their collective memory binding them together in a shared understanding of loss. Ella visited the hospital frequently, not to investigate further, but to reflect and process her experiences. She left flowers and notes in the examination room where the final confrontation had taken place. Though the shadows of the past would always remain, Ella emerged from the experience transformed. She carried with her the stories of those who had suffered, a guardian of their memories, vowing to honor their pain and ensure that such horrors would never be repeated. In her quiet moments, Ella often found herself staring out of her office window, lost in thought. Sometimes, the wind would whisper through the trees, and for a fleeting second, she could almost hear the anguished cries of the souls she had released. Determined to move forward, Ella sought solace in her work, taking on new cases and immersing herself in the pursuit of justice. The memories of the hospital remained etched in her mind, resurfacing at the most unexpected moments. On a particularly quiet night, as Ella sat in her living room, a soft knock echoed through the stillness. Heart racing, she approached the door, her pulse quickening with each step. Opening it just a crack, she found nothing but darkness. Yet the feeling of being on the precipice of something profound enveloped her. The air thickened, and she could almost hear the whispers of the spirits once more, a reminder that while she had faced the curse, it was not entirely broken. As she closed the door, a single candle flickered on the table, casting long, wavering shadows that seemed to stretch toward her. The hospital's dark legacy lingered, a reminder that some curses are never truly lifted, and Ella was left with an unsettling sense that the horror might return, lurking just beyond the veil of the ordinary world.